Hi there. In today's video, I'll be assembling a pack frame for this Yaesu FT-891 HF mobile unit. And there's a lot of HF radios on the market, and the reason that I settled on this one is the price point and form factor. I currently have an HF rig, the Zygu 5105, which I mentioned in episode 11, and that radio covers 160 to 6 meters, but the maximum power output on it is 5 watts, and it's mostly intended for QRP operation. This FT-891, however, has a maximum output of 100 watts, and it also covers the 160 to 6 meter range. I won't go into detail in this video on how to use this radio and all of its menu functions. Perhaps that's a topic for another day. But also in this build, I'll be including an LDG Z-11 tuner, and the purpose of this piece of equipment is it will provide semi-automatic antenna tuning across the entire HF spectrum, including 6 meters up to 125 watts. So this tuner should be a nice complement to the FT-891. The pack frame for the radio is model number TPA 891B, and that's from Armor Lock. And the antenna I'll be pairing the radio with is from Wolf River Coils. It's a Silver Bullet Platinum TIA, which stands for Take It Along. This antenna works on bands from 80 meters to 10 meters, and it includes an antenna coil, 3 33-foot ground radials, 1 telescoping whip, and a tripod mount. The antenna is rated for up to 500 watts, so it should be able to handle the maximum power output of the radio without any issues. To power the radio, I'm using a Bieno 12-volt, 20 amp hour LiFePO4 battery from powerworks.com. The specifications state it's ideal for scientific instrumentation, surveillance equipment, and is rumored to be popular for amateur radio applications. The maximum power is 480 watts and a continuous maximum discharge of 40 amps. An online review I read stated this battery offers sufficient run times and power for 100-watt radios, so I'm hoping this battery will satisfy the power needs for the radio. To power the tuner, I'm using a Bieno 12-volt, 12 amp hour LiFePO4 battery, and that one can deliver a maximum load of 240 watts and a maximum continuous discharge of 20 amps. The applications for this type of battery range from audio amplifiers and audiovisual equipment to surveillance equipment. This battery should be more than enough to power the tuner, I'm hoping. And when assembling a portable rig, you don't want to overlook the batteries, as it'll be the most important part of your kit. Aside from the power output of the batteries, I chose them due to their form factor, since all of this will be contained in a pack, and I wanted it to be as light as possible. For the assembly, there's some parts that I needed to buy separately to complete the rig. The Armor Lock pack frame does come with all the hardware you'll need to mount the frame to the radio, and it came with these packages of screws, and I did order separately a audio relocation cable and mount, as well as a data relocation cable and mount, and also in this package is an antenna connector and mount, and those do attach to the frame. I did also need to purchase a cable for the antenna feed line and some other adapters to complete this assembly. So I'll start with the SMA male to BNC male adapter, and that is going to be to connect the antenna to this antenna mount on the pack frame. Next up is the PL259 to BNC female right angle adapter, and for this build I needed 3 of them, one for the radio and these other 2 are for the back of the tuner. And next is the RG8X BNC male to BNC male 12-inch cable, and there's going to be one that connects from the back of the tuner to the radio, and then the other one is the antenna feed line. One of my requirements for this rig is I wanted the power source to trickle charge off of a solar panel. And to accomplish that, I'm going to be using a Yaesu GV10 solar charge controller for the radio. And for the tuner, I'm going to be using a GV5 solar charge controller. So that would be these two pieces of equipment here. This is the GV10 for the radio and the GV5 for the tuner. And when selecting a charge controller, you want to ensure the one that you pick is going to work with the type of battery you're running. So if you're running a sealed lead acid battery, you want a charge controller for that type of battery. For this build, I'm using lithium batteries and have selected comparable charge controllers. Finally, with all my rigs, they need to be portable. I want the ability to use all of my pack frame builds in both my truck and in the field. So if I leave my vehicle, I want to be able to simply unplug my gear and go. When I'm in the field, I want a base station that I can charge using a solar panel. Whenever I'm planning a build, I usually draw it out. And I know this is a bit rudimentary, but here's the rig mapped out so I can visualize how everything will be connected. What I'm attempting to illustrate here is the radio and tuner will be stacked on top of each other. They'll be connected to their respective charge controllers, and then those charge controllers are connected to the battery as well as the solar panel, or panels in this case. Some people learn by writing out specifications. However, I'm a visual learner, so I like to draw things out so I can figure out what connectors, wiring, and other odds and ends I'll need. Originally, I had planned on having everything connected to one power source and through one charge controller. However, I was concerned with noise interference with connecting everything to one power source, so I'm hoping to eliminate some of that by having the radio and tuner powered separately. Finding a charge controller that can handle the power demands of both without becoming overloaded can get pricey, so that was another consideration. So for me, this is what I think will be a viable alternative, is just having them on separate power systems. And my understanding from the research that I've done is the Yaesu brand charge controllers are pretty good for amateur radio. There's not a lot of noise that people report on them. They're generally pretty quiet, so that was a consideration for picking these two particular charge controllers. And I did pick ones that would be comparable for carrying the load of each battery. So the battery is connected to the tuner and radio. I'll go ahead and assemble the rig, and when I come back, I'm going to show you the final product, and I'll discuss what worked, what didn't, and walk you through the build. Okay, I'm finished with the assembly, and while I was putting this together, I took some notes on what I thought worked, what didn't, and ways that I had to improvise. So I'm going to switch cameras here in a second so you can get a better view of the radio and the batteries, and I'll also discuss the pack that the entire kit's going to fit inside of. So stand by. I've done quite a few of these projects over the years, and for whatever reason this particular one was kind of difficult to put together. I don't think it was from a lack of planning, but admittedly I did go through a few different iterations of how I wanted to manage the electrical and where I wanted to mount some of the other pieces to the rig. I'll start with what worked, and mapping out the build did make it pretty easy to list all of the connectors and wiring I would need. All of the components I purchased, from the radio to the tuner, the batteries, charge controllers, etc., all function as expected. Researching the power supply, and I'll get to the batteries in a moment, but I'm confident the batteries and charge controllers will be able to deliver sufficient power to the rig, and with a decent enough solar panel, keep it running in the field. So things that didn't work. Originally I had planned to mount the tuner, which is down here, to the top of the pack frame. And the reason that I had originally planned on that is because I saw a similar rig that looked pretty cool with that setup. And what I discovered is that the tuner is too long for the frame where I had it mounted, and it was pretty much running out of real estate, so it was actually protruding past the frame, and the intent is to put this inside of a pack and basically stand it up on its end like this, but I wasn't able to do that with the tuner protruding past the frame. So I decided to mount it on the bottom, and I used this CB mount that I had lying around, and it was too wide for this tuner, so I cut it in half with with my grinder. I put a cutting wheel on it, cut this mount in half, made these brackets, and then figured out how to mount it to this frame. Originally, I had some screws holding this together, and those really weren't that stable, and it didn't look very good. So I decided to rivet the mounts to the housing for this tuner, and so there's a couple here, and then you can't see it, but they're actually under this tape that I've got, but there's a couple more here. And I thought that just gave it a little bit of a cleaner look to the rig. In a moment, I'll kind of talk about what I had to improvise with, because that's really related to the batteries, but I'll show you the rest of the rig. So this is the top, and on this side I've got my antenna feed line. This is for the audio, and then this is a data cable. And then of course I've got my hand mic, which I had to scour the internet for, and basically one of these wires that plugs into the hand mic goes to the audio port. On the back of the radio, you can see there's quite a bit of wiring, and this is, I think, why I had so much difficulty, because I had to kind of figure out how to manage all of these wires. And so you know, basically this is the end result, and I've got my power going into the radio here. This red cable goes to the tuner and connects down here. Down here I've got my power coming into the tuner. These are my feed lines for the antenna, and then up here is my data cable. On the other side of the radio, I've got my fuses, and let me turn this back around so you can see it a little bit better. These are fuses that are going to the radio, and then this is the power that goes into the radio and then the tuner. So that is the walkthrough of the radio. So I'm going to clear all this off the table and show you the batteries next. When I was assembling the power supplies, I had to come up with a way to mount the charge controllers to the batteries. And I didn't want to permanently mount anything in case I needed to take this stuff apart. You know, if like the controller or the battery went bad, I wanted to be able to take it apart very quickly and swap out for new components. This is the power supply for the tuner, and it's using the GB5 charge controller. And so I started out just mocking it up by holding it in place with these rubber bands, and once I got it in a spot that I liked, I figured out how long I wanted my connections to be. I made each one of these Anderson connections myself with a kit that I have. And if you'll notice, this charge controller is a little bit different than the GV10, and this is the one for the radio. But if you'll notice, the GB5 has a connection for the panel, the battery, and the load, and this one has a connection for the battery and the panel. So how this works is this Anderson cable goes to the solar panel, this one connects to the battery, and this is my load that goes to the tuner. For the power supply for the radio, and on the battery here, this is the same connection as this. I think it's like a 2.1 millimeter connection. And so let me just pull this out so you can see it. So you can see it's connected like that. And it basically, the other end is this Anderson connection, and that goes to the battery. And then I've got this Anderson connector for the panel, and then out of the battery is another one, and that's my load that goes to the radio. So that is how those work. And finally, I'll show you the pack that all of this is going to fit in. I had another bag that I intended on using, and it really ended up not being sufficient for the final kit. And I don't know if you've had to look for bags to put a pack frame into, but it's pretty difficult to find a decent one. And I ended up finding this one, which is a used radio bag that I found online at an Army surplus store. And it's a bag that was made for a Harris Falcon II. And what that is, it's a basically a military radio. And this bag's pretty ideal because I've got quite a bit of stuff to carry. You saw the rig itself, the power supplies, but I've also got some wiring for the power supplies that I need to wire through the bag. I've got my feed line for the antenna. I've got my radials, and I have the rest of the antenna parts here that also need to go in this bag. And the way it's designed, it's pretty cool because all of this stuff will fit in there. The bag has some pouches on the sides for the antennas, so I can put the Wolf River coil on this side. I can put the rest of the antenna parts on this side. I can put my radials and other things in here if I needed to. And another part that's kind of neat, and I don't know if you can really see inside of it, it is padded, so I did try it on. It is fairly comfortable to carry, but it's hard to see down at the bottom here. Maybe I can pull out another light for you. So at the bottom of this bag, there's basically some straps, and let's see, I'm going to pull up this flap. So there's some straps down there at the bottom, and those actually cradle the radio. And at the very bottom is a little space down here where I'm going to put the power supply for the tuner. The radio will actually fit here on one side. The power supply for the radio will go here, and then I can actually use these little straps to kind of hold everything together. But I was pretty happy that I was able to find this thing. I did quite a bit of research looking for a suitable solution for this, and this is what I arrived at. I know it's probably a little bit of overkill because it is a fairly large pack, and there's a lot of things to carry around, but surprisingly the entire kit's fairly light, and I'm looking forward to using this in the field. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and that's all for now.